Captain John Reed stared through the viewport of the Humanity's Hope, his weathered face reflecting the blue-green sphere of Terra Nova below. After centuries of rampant industrialization had rendered Earth uninhabitable, humanity had found this pristine world a second chance. But old habits died hard. Mining operations in Sector 7 report 200% yield this quarter, sir. Lieutenant Anna Davis reported, her voice carrying a hint of pride that made Reed's stomach turn. And the indigenous response? He asked, though he already knew the answer. Nothing significant. A few geological anomalies, but the science team says it's within acceptable parameters. Reed nodded absently. Terra Nova had proven surprisingly accommodating for human settlement. Perfect atmosphere, abundant resources, and most importantly, no advanced indigenous life forms to object to human expansion. Just plants, simple animals, and bizarre crystalline formations that the science team found fascinating but ultimately harmless. General Williams appeared on the command deck, his military uniform adorned with medals from Earth's final resource wars. Reed, I need to speak with you about those anomalies. In the privacy of Reed's office, Williams displayed holographic readings. These energy signatures are increasing in frequency and intensity. They seem to concentrate around our deepest mining sites. Reed frowned. What does Dr. Moore say? That's just it. She's gone silent after sending this final report. Williams played a recorded message. Dr. Moore's pale face filled the screen, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and awe. The crystals, they're not geological formations. They're neural pathways. The entire planet, it's one massive organism, and we're hurting it. The recording ended abruptly with a tremor shaking the camera. When was this recorded? Reed demanded. 3 days ago. We lost contact with the research station shortly after. Reed ordered an immediate expedition to the site. When they arrived, they found the research station intact, but empty, as if the team had simply walked away. Strange crystalline growths had begun to encroach on the station's foundations. Dr. Tom Evans, the expedition's geologist, knelt to examine one. These weren't in any of our surveys. They've grown at an impossible rate. A low-frequency hum began to vibrate through their boots. The ground trembled. Everyone back to the shuttle, Reed ordered. As they retreated, Evans stumbled, his hand brushing against one of the crystals. He froze, his eyes going wide. It's aware, he whispered. The planet. It's thinking. That night, Reed couldn't sleep. Earth's history haunted him. How humanity had drained its homeworld dry before abandoning it like a discarded husk. Now they were doing the same to Terra Nova, and for the first time, he wondered if they were facing something they couldn't simply conquer. In the command center, alarms blared. Sir, we're detecting massive seismic activity across all mining sectors, Davis reported. On the monitors, Reed watched as fissures opened near the mining operations. Workers fled as massive crystal formations erupted from the earth, glowing, with an inner light that pulsed like a heartbeat. Evacuation protocols, Reed ordered. Get everyone back to the settlement. But it was already too late for some. Reports flooded in of workers standing transfixed before the crystals, dropping their tools and walking into the wilderness. Others reported hearing voices in their heads, a singular message repeating, "Enough is enough. Witness true power," as dawn broke over the main settlement. Reed realized humanity's conquest of Terra Nova had just met its first real resistance. And unlike Earth, this planet was fighting back. The morning sky above New Hope City burned crimson as crystal formations erupted from the ground like jagged teeth, surrounding the settlement in a matter of hours. The mining outposts had gone silent one by one throughout the night. Reed assembled an emergency council in the administration tower, the highest point in the city. Government officials, military personnel, and science advisors gathered around, a holographic display of the planet's surface, watching in horror as red dots, crystal eruptions, multiplied across the map. We've lost contact with all outlying stations, reported Communications Officer Ben Foster. And we're getting strange readings from the atmospheric processors. Dr. Lisa Wright, who had taken over as chief scientist after Moore's disappearance, pointed to the data. The air composition is changing. The oxygen levels are fluctuating wildly. Is it trying to suffocate us? Asked Governor Miles, his face ashen. No, Wright replied, studying the patterns. If anything, it's communicating. These aren't random fluctuations. There's a pattern here. Outside, citizens gathered in the streets, pointing at the crystal formations that now loomed over the city's edges. They pulsed with a hypnotic blue light, sending ripples of color across their faceted surfaces. Reed dispatched a team to establish a defensive perimeter, but the soldiers returned with disturbing reports. Anyone who approached the crystals too closely began to hear voices, whispers that spoke of Earth's fate and humanity's destructive nature. By midday, a group of colonists had formed near the eastern crystals, calling themselves the Listeners. They claimed the planet was offering a choice: harmony or expulsion. "The voice showed me Earth as it once was," explained Mark Taylor, a former mining engineer whose eyes now held an unnerving serenity. "And then it showed me what we've done to Terra Nova in just 5 years. The scars we've created run deeper than we can see." Reed was losing control. More colonists joined the Listeners every hour. In her lab, Wright made a breakthrough. The crystalline structures aren't just neural pathways. They're more like synapses in a brain, and they're multiplying, forming new connections at an exponential rate. "It's evolving?" Reed asked. "It's waking up," Wright corrected. "Our mining operations pierced deep enough to trigger a defensive response, and now it's becoming more conscious by the hour." A violent tremor shook the building. Outside, the ground split open along the city's main thoroughfare, and a massive crystal spire erupted in the central plaza, towering over the administration building itself. Unlike the others, this crystal pulsed with a golden light. As the dust settled, every screen, speaker, and communication device in the city activated simultaneously. A voice, neither male nor female, neither mechanical nor organic, addressed the colonists. "I have watched. I have learned. Your kind destroyed your first home, and now seek to destroy me. No more." The spire pulsed brighter. "Those who wish to live in balance may stay. The rest will depart." The city's power grid failed completely, plunging them into darkness save for the golden light of the central spire and the blue glow of the surrounding crystal ring. Reed stared at the central spire from his window, feeling the weight of humanity's history pressing down on him. They had come to Terra Nova seeking resources, not partnership. They had drilled and mined and harvested without once considering that the planet itself might have a say. "What are our options?" Governor Miles asked, his voice barely a whisper. "General," Williams stepped forward, "we still have the orbital platforms. We can bombard these formations from space." Reed turned from the window. "And start another war we can't win? Against an entire planet?" He shook his head. "We've tried conquering nature before. We lost Earth that way." As night fell, more colonists walked toward the crystals, drawn by promises whispered directly into their minds. Visions of a new way. To live, not as conquerors, but as partners with the world they inhabited. Reed knew he faced the most important decision of his life: fight a losing battle against an awakened planet, or find a way to coexist with a force humanity had never encountered before. Dawn revealed a transformed landscape. The crystal formations had continued to grow overnight, creating a network that now pulsed with synchronized light, like a visible heartbeat encircling New Hope City. Nearly a third of the colonists had joined the Listeners, camping near the crystal boundaries and refusing to return. In the command center, Reed studied the latest reports with growing concern. The planet's activity was accelerating. Preliminary scans showed crystal formations emerging on every continent across Terra Nova. "It's creating a neural network around the entire planet," Dr. Wright explained, gesturing to global imagery. "These patterns match how neurons connect in a human brain, just on a planetary scale." General Williams slammed his fist on the table. "We should evacuate while we still can. Get everyone off-world and then sterilize this rock from orbit." "With what resources?" Governor Miles countered. "We have 3 colony ships in orbit with limited fuel reserves. We can't evacuate everyone, and we certainly can't return to Earth." Reed had spent the night reviewing Terra Nova's history. Every scan, every geological survey, every biological sample. A pattern emerged that they had all missed. Subtle responses to human activity from the very beginning. The planet had been reacting all along, but too slowly for them to notice until they crossed some critical threshold. "I need to speak with them," Reed announced suddenly. "Speak with who?" Williams demanded. "The listeners, and through them, the planet." Despite protests, Reed traveled to the eastern boundary where Mark Taylor had established the largest listener camp. The scene was surreal. Hundreds of colonists sitting in concentric circles around a crystal spire, their faces tranquil. Taylor greeted Reed with unexpected warmth. "Captain, we've been expecting you." "What exactly is happening to you people?" Reed asked, noticing how the colonists' skin had taken on a subtle luminescence, with faint patterns resembling the crystal structures visible beneath their skin. "We're connecting," Taylor explained. "Terra Nova isn't just alive. It's ancient. It's been developing consciousness for millions of years, with the crystal network as its nervous system. Our mining operations damaged crucial nodes, causing it pain and triggering its defensive awakening. And now? Now it wants to understand us. It's learning our language, our history, our minds. Through us, it seeks to know if coexistence is possible." A young woman approached, her eyes reflecting the crystal's light. "It wants to speak with you, Captain. You who lead the Sky People." Reed hesitated only briefly before following them to the central crystal. The colonists formed a circle, joining hands. Taylor guided Reed to place his palm against the crystal's surface. The world dissolved. Reed found himself floating in a vast consciousness, ancient, patient, and incredibly alien. He felt its curiosity, its pain from the mining operations, and most shockingly, its willingness to forgive. It had watched humanity's arrival with interest, observed their technology and adaptation with admiration, and only turned defensive when the mining reached critical neural clusters. In this merged consciousness, Reed shared humanity's story, their ruined homeworld, their desperate search for a new beginning, their fear of extinction. The entity absorbed this history with neither judgment nor absolution, simply understanding. When Reed returned to his body, he fell to his knees, overwhelmed. Hours had passed, though it felt like minutes. "It showed you?" Taylor asked. Reed nodded, finding words inadequate. "It showed me everything." Back at the command center, Reed faced skepticism as he explained what he'd experienced. "You expect us to believe the planet offered a peace treaty?" Williams scoffed. "Not a treaty," Reed corrected. "A choice. We can continue as we are and face escalating defensive measures, or we can adapt, learn to live with Terra Nova rather than simply on it." Dr. Wright studied new readings with amazement. The atmospheric composition has stabilized, and these energy signatures, the planet is actively repairing the damage to its neural pathways. Outside, the central crystal spire pulsed with increasing intensity. Colonists reported hearing a message repeating throughout the settlement: "Choose, partnership or departure. Witness what we might become together." Reed knew that humanity stood at a crossroads unlike any in their history. For the first time, they faced not an adversary to be conquered, but a potential ally whose power they were only beginning to comprehend. As the day ended, more colonists walked toward the boundaries, drawn by the promise of a new relationship with the world they had come to call home. 1 week after first contact, New Hope City had transformed. The crystal formations no longer encircled the settlement menacingly, but had rearranged into flowing patterns that channeled energy through the colony's districts. Nearly half the population had joined the listeners, their bodies subtly altered, faint, crystalline patterns beneath their skin, eyes that occasionally flickered with inner light. Reed stood in the newly established interface chamber, a dome-shaped building constructed around the central crystal spire. Here, humans and planet maintained continuous communication. "The symbiosis is remarkable," Dr. Wright explained, monitoring a group of colonists in meditation around the spire. "Their neural patterns synchronize with the crystal network. Through them, we're learning to translate the planet's language. This language wasn't made of words, but of sensations, images, and concepts transferred directly to human consciousness." The planet, which the listeners now called Gaia after Earth's mythological consciousness, communicated through emotional impressions and memory transfers. But unity was far from complete. General Williams had established a preservation camp on the outskirts of the city, where nearly 1,000 colonists rejected communion with the planet and maintained strict isolation from the crystal formations. They're being absorbed, Williams insisted during emergency council meetings, losing their humanity to this thing. Reed couldn't entirely dismiss these concerns. The listeners were changing in ways science couldn't fully explain. Yet they reported expanded consciousness, heightened sensory perception, and profound contentment. Meanwhile, the orbital platforms detected approaching ships, the second wave of colonists from Earth, unaware of Terra Nova's awakening. Reed had less than a month to establish a stable relationship with the planet before 5,000 new humans arrived. Gaia understands our dilemma, Taylor explained during a council session, his eyes occasionally flickering with crystal light. It has a proposal. Under Gaia's guidance, construction began on new settlement patterns, buildings that worked with the planet's neural pathways rather than disrupting them. The listeners demonstrated how to harvest resources without causing pain to the planetary consciousness, using crystalline tools that communicated directly with Terra Nova's network. Most surprisingly, Gaia began offering gifts, new knowledge about Terra Nova's indigenous life, meteorological control that protected settlements from storms, and biological insights that revolutionized the colony's medical capabilities. Dr. Wright made perhaps the most significant breakthrough when she established that the crystal structures could store and process information like biological computers. They're not just neural pathways, they're memory banks. Gaia has been accumulating knowledge for millions of years. Reed spent increasing time with the listeners, though he maintained his distance from full communion. He needed to represent all colonists, even those who feared the change. During one session in the interface chamber, Gaia shared a vision that shook him profoundly. Earth as it had been millennia ago, vibrant and alive. The message was clear. Earth, too, had been conscious once, before humanity's industrial development severed its neural connections beyond repair. It's showing us our mistake, Reed realized, and offering a different path forward. But resistance was growing in Williams's camp. Military personnel had begun stockpiling weapons, and communications with the orbital platforms became increasingly guarded. The confrontation came when Williams's engineers attempted to restart mining operations in a remote sector. The planet's response was immediate, not violent, but unmistakable. Crystal formations encased the mining equipment, rendering it useless without harming the operators. Williams saw this as the provocation he needed. It's disabled our equipment, our lifeline to survival. This is an act of war. That evening, as Reed negotiated with Williams to maintain peace, alarms blared throughout the settlement. Williams's faction had seized control of an orbital defense platform and was preparing to fire on the largest crystal formations. Reed raced to the interface chamber, where Taylor and other listeners were already communing with Gaia. "Can you stop the attack?" Reed demanded. Taylor's expression was surprisingly calm. Gaia anticipated this. It wants you to witness its true power, not as a threat, but as proof that violence is unnecessary. As the orbital platform positioned itself to strike, the crystal network across Terra Nova illuminated simultaneously. Energy surged through the planetary grid in patterns too complex for instruments to track. The defense platform's targeting systems failed inexplicably, then its propulsion, then life support. Within minutes, the platform was dead in orbit, its crew evacuating to emergency shuttles. Throughout New Hope City, every piece of technology briefly deactivated, then reactivated with crystal-like patterns, flowing through their circuitry. The message was unmistakable. Gaia could control their technology at will, yet chose cooperation instead of dominance. That night, addressing the entire colony, Reed made humanity's position clear. "We came to Terra Nova seeking resources and found a partner instead. Today we witnessed not just the planet's power to defend itself, but its restraint in doing so. The choice before us isn't surrender or resistance, it's evolution or stagnation." As the colony processed this demonstration of planetary consciousness, the advanced ships from Earth appeared in the sky, bringing thousands more humans to a world unlike anything they had been prepared for. The arrival of the colony ships, New Dawn, Prosperity, and Future's Hope, created immediate chaos. 5,000 fresh colonists descended upon a world fundamentally different from the one described in their mission briefings. Reed established a quarantine zone where new arrivals could acclimate gradually to Terra Nova's reality. The sight of the transformed original colonists, especially the listeners with their crystalline patterns and occasional luminescence, caused fear and confusion among the newcomers. Admiral James Porter, commander of the second wave, was particularly disturbed. "This wasn't the arrangement, Reed. We were supposed to find a tamed world ready for expansion." "The arrangement changed when we discovered the planet was sentient," Reed replied. "We're not conquerors here. We're guests who have been offered partnership." Porter's skepticism reflected Earth's desperate situation. The planet they had left behind was in its final throes of habitability. These colonists had no backup plan. Dr. Wright led the scientific orientation, showing new arrivals how Terra Nova's neural network functioned and the benefits of cooperation. "The planet can regulate its climate, protect us from cosmic radiation, even accelerate plant growth in our agricultural sectors. Working with Gaia offers advantages we never anticipated." Some newcomers embraced this new paradigm with fascination. Others, particularly military and industrial leaders, saw it as surrender of humanity's dominance. A tense equilibrium held for nearly a month as integration proceeded cautiously. The listeners demonstrated remarkable abilities: enhanced healing, intuitive understanding of Terra Nova's ecosystems, and limited telepathic communication with each other through the crystal network. Porter and Williams, however, had been meeting privately. Their conspiracy came to light when Reed discovered unauthorized equipment being moved to the New Dawn, still in orbit. "They're adapting the colony ship's engines," reported Security Chief Alex Thompson. "Our sources say they're creating a makeshift weapon, something that could potentially damage the crystal network's main nodes." Reed confronted Porter directly. "You're planning to attack the planetary consciousness. Do you understand what you're risking?" Porter's expression hardened. "What I understand is that half my people are being seduced by some alien influence, while the other half watch in horror. This isn't symbiosis, Reed. It's infiltration." That night, the attack came without warning. The New Dawn positioned itself over the largest crystal formation on the southern continent and fired a concentrated energy beam. The impact was catastrophic. A massive crystalline spire shattered, sending shockwaves through the entire network. Every listener fell to the ground simultaneously, screaming in agony as they experienced Gaia's pain. In the interface chamber, the central crystal darkened for the first time since its emergence. Reed ordered immediate evacuation of all settlements, fearing planetary retaliation, but the response, when it came, was not what anyone expected. Rather than striking back at human structures, Terra Nova went silent. The crystal networks dimmed. The atmospheric improvements stabilized by Gaia began to deteriorate. Vital systems, maintained by the planetary consciousness, water purification, weather stabilization, protection from solar radiation, began to fail one by one. "It's not attacking us," Dr. Wright realized with horror. "It's withdrawing, like a wounded animal, retreating to lick its wounds." The consequences became rapidly apparent. Without Gaia's intervention, Terra Nova's natural systems began to assert themselves, and they were far less hospitable than the moderated environment they had enjoyed. Storms gathered on the horizons. Seismic activity increased. Indigenous plant life, previously held in balance, began growing at accelerated rates around human settlements. In orbit, Porter watched with growing concern as his sensors reported deteriorating conditions planet-wide. His victory felt increasingly hollow. The listeners, recovered from their initial shock, gathered in the now darkened interface chamber. Taylor addressed the desperate colonists. "Gaia is wounded, but not defeated. It has retreated into its deepest nodes to protect itself. The planet is reverting to its primal state. Can you reconnect?" Reed asked. "Not alone," Taylor replied. "We need to demonstrate that Porter's attack doesn't represent all of humanity. We need a gesture significant enough to reach Gaia in its withdrawn state." What followed was a desperate plan. Using the colony's remaining functional ships, Reed led an expedition to the damaged crystal formation. Hundreds of volunteers, both original colonists and newcomers who had embraced symbiosis, formed a human chain around the shattered crystal spire. As night fell, they began a synchronized meditation, focusing their consciousness toward the damaged node. The listeners guided them, teaching rudimentary techniques to project their thoughts into the neural network. For hours, nothing happened. Then, as dawn broke, a faint luminescence appeared in the crystal fragments. Slowly, painfully, the shattered pieces began to rise, pulling themselves together. Reed watched in awe as humans and planet engaged in mutual healing. The colonists providing the conscious focus Gaia needed to repair itself, the planet gradually, restoring the environmental protections upon which human survival depended. In orbit, Porter witnessed the reconstruction through the New Dawn's sensors. The image of hundreds of humans helping restore what he had tried to destroy forced him to confront an uncomfortable truth. Humanity's path forward on Terra Nova would not be one of conquest. As the damaged crystal reformed, glowing with renewed energy, a message pulsed through every human present. Witness true power, not in destruction, but in renewal. Enough division. Choose unity. 3 months after the crystal restoration, Terra Nova had entered a new phase of human planetary cooperation. The incident with the New Dawn had become a turning point, demonstrating both Gaia's vulnerability and its capacity for forgiveness. Porter had surrendered command of the military contingent, accepting a role as liaison between the orbital facilities and ground settlements. His perspective had shifted dramatically after witnessing the crystal restoration and the subsequent revival of Terra Nova's protective functions that saved countless lives during a devastating meteor shower his weapons could never have countered. "We misunderstood power," he admitted during a council meeting. "We thought dominance was strength. This planet taught us otherwise." New Hope City had been rebuilt according to designs that accommodated the crystal network. Buildings incorporated living crystal formations that provided clean energy, environmental regulation, and direct communication with Gaia. The distinction between technology and biology blurred as human innovations merged with planetary systems. The most profound changes occurred among those who embraced fuller communion with Gaia. The listeners had evolved beyond their initial transformations, their neural patterns permanently altered to maintain continuous connection with the planetary consciousness while retaining their human identity. Dr. Wright documented these evolutionary changes with scientific rigor. "They're becoming a bridge species," she explained to Reed. "Not losing their humanity, but expanding it to include awareness of something larger." This expansion manifested in remarkable abilities. Listeners could sense environmental changes across vast distances, communicate non-verbally through the crystal network, and access Gaia's accumulated knowledge, a planetary library spanning millions of years. Not all colonists chose this path. A significant population maintained traditional human existence, benefiting from the partnership with Gaia without direct neural connection. Reed himself remained unconnected, believing someone needed to maintain perspective on both sides of the evolutionary divide. The true test of this new relationship came when geological surveys revealed a critical resource shortage. The colony's technology required rare elements that existed on Terra Nova, but primarily within regions that contained vital nodes of Gaia's neural network. In previous months, this would have created an impossible conflict between human needs and planetary consciousness. Instead, it sparked unprecedented collaboration. Through the interface chamber, listeners communicated the problem to Gaia. The response was unexpected. The planet began shifting its internal composition, moving critical minerals toward the surface in locations that wouldn't damage neural pathways. "It's rearranging its geological structure," marveled Chief Engineer Mike Wilson. "Something that should take millions of years is happening in weeks." This deliberate reorganization of resources demonstrated Gaia's commitment to partnership and its previously unimaginable power to control its physical form. In return, human engineers developed new harvesting methods that strengthened rather than damaged the crystal network, creating a mutually beneficial exchange. The most profound revelation came when the listeners, led by Taylor, approached Reed with a message from the planetary consciousness. In the interface chamber surrounded by pulsing crystals, Taylor explained, "Gaia has shown us something extraordinary. Terra Nova isn't unique. Throughout our galaxy, living planets exist at various stages of consciousness. Earth was one before. Industrial development severed its neural connections beyond repair. Reed absorbed this with growing wonder. Are you saying other planets like Gaia exist? More than that, Taylor continued, his eyes reflecting crystal light. Gaia is part of a network, a community of planetary consciousnesses that communicate across vast distances through means we barely comprehend. And now, it wants to introduce us. The implications staggered Reed. Humanity had fled a dying Earth seeking resources on Terra Nova, only to discover something far more valuable. An introduction to a galactic community they never knew existed. That evening, in a ceremony attended by representatives from all colony factions, the interface chamber was reconfigured to attempt something unprecedented. Contact with another planetary consciousness light years away, using Gaia as an intermediary. As the crystal network illuminated in perfect synchronization around the globe, the listeners formed a circle, channeling the connection. Reed and other non-connected humans observed from a respectful distance. Through the listeners, Gaia spoke directly to the assembled colonists. You came seeking resources. You found relationship. Now witness the true power of connection that spans stars. You are not alone in this universe, neither your species nor mine. Together, we join something greater. The central crystal pulsed with colors never before seen, representing contact with a consciousness beyond Terra Nova. Through this connection, humanity glimpsed something profound. Not just survival on a new world, but participation in a cosmic community that transcended their understanding of life itself. Reed watched as humans and planet took their first step toward a future neither could have imagined alone. A future where power came not from domination, but from connection. 10 years after humanity's arrival on Terra Nova, the anniversary of first contact was celebrated throughout human settlements and crystal node clusters alike. What had begun as a desperate colonization effort had evolved into something unprecedented in human history. Genuine symbiosis with a planetary consciousness. Reed, now serving as chief ambassador rather than captain, stood at the edge of harmony. City. The sprawling settlement that had replaced New Hope City as Terra Nova's primary human habitation. From this vantage point, he could see the perfect integration of human construction and living crystal architecture, buildings that grew rather than being merely built. Hard to remember, we once thought this was just a resource deposit, remarked Anna Davis, who had exchanged her lieutenant's uniform for the crystalline patterns of a full listener. Reed nodded. Harder still to remember we nearly destroyed it out of fear. The changes over the decade had been profound. Nearly 30% of the human population had chosen to become listeners, their biology permanently altered through communion with Gaia. They formed the bridge between traditional humanity and planetary consciousness, translating the needs and knowledge of both sides. More remarkable was the galactic community that had opened to them through Gaia's connections. Contact had been established with 12 other living planets, each hosting their own unique forms of life existing in various relationships with their planetary consciousnesses. The interface chamber had expanded into a vast complex dedicated to interplanetary communication. There, specialized listeners maintained continuous contact with other worlds, exchanging knowledge that transformed human understanding of biology, physics, and consciousness itself. Perhaps most significantly, scientific teams had begun the audacious project of healing Earth. Using knowledge gained from Gaia and other planetary consciousnesses, expeditions had returned to their devastated homeworld to attempt restoration of its severed neural pathways. The initial results are promising, Dr. Wright reported during the anniversary council. Now in her 70s, she had dedicated her remaining years to documenting the human-Gaia partnership. The crystalline implants we've established in Earth's crust are showing signs of integration with the remnant pathways. It may take centuries, but Earth's consciousness could potentially be revived. The prospect of awakening their original home had given humanity a new purpose, to become healers rather than exploiters. Not all developments had been harmonious. A minority of colonists still rejected communion with Gaia, maintaining isolated settlements where they preserved traditional human culture. Yet even these communities benefited from the partnership, receiving protection and resources while contributing their unique perspectives to the colony's governance. As twilight descended, Reed made his way to the Grand Interface, a massive, crystal amphitheater where the decade's most important ceremony would take place. Thousands of colonists gathered, both connected and unconnected, to witness the event. Mark Taylor, now barely recognizable as human with his crystalline integrations extending throughout his body, served as primary conduit. His transformation represented the furthest extent of human Gaia integration, not losing humanity, but transcending its biological limitations. Today we commemorate not just 10 years of cooperation, Taylor addressed the assembly, his voice resonating through the crystal structures, but the birth of something neither humanity nor Gaia could have achieved alone. At his signal, the crystal network across the entire planet illuminated simultaneously. Above the amphitheater, the sky itself seemed to shimmer as Gaia manipulated atmospheric particles to create a living display of the partnership's history. From the first mining operations to the present day of coexistence, through Taylor, Gaia addressed the colonists directly. 10 cycles of your time have shown what is possible when dominion yields to partnership. Your kind feared submission and loss of identity. Instead, you have expanded beyond your former limitations. Together, we have grown stronger than either could alone. The crystal network pulsed with new intensity as Gaia revealed its greatest gift, a dimensional visualization of the interplanetary network that spanned the galaxy. Dozens of living worlds, connected in communication, each with their own unique relationship to the life forms they hosted. This is true power. Not the ability to take, but to connect. Not to consume, but to create. The strength you once sought through conquest was but a shadow of what you have found through communion. As the display reached its zenith, a new connection flared to life in the galactic network, a faint but unmistakable pulse from Earth. The restoration efforts were bearing fruit. The first whispers of Earth's reawakening consciousness had been detected. Tears streamed down Reed's weathered face as he witnessed this fulfillment of humanity's most impossible hope. Not just finding a new home, but healing the one they had damaged. Through partnership with Terra Nova, they had found the wisdom and means to undo their greatest mistake. In the decades since that first crystal eruption, and the message, "Enough is enough," witnessed true power, humanity had indeed witnessed power beyond anything they had imagined. Not the power of domination that had destroyed Earth, but the power of symbiosis that might yet save it. As the ceremony concluded, Reed gazed upward at the stars visible through the crystal dome. Among them lay other living worlds, some already in communication, others yet to be discovered. And somewhere in that vast expanse, Earth pulsed with renewed potential, a testament to how far humanity had come from conquerors to healers. The planet had struck back not to destroy them, but to transform them. And in that transformation, both had found something greater than either could have achieved alone. The end.